I'm 27 years old, and I live out of eastern Texas. Moved here from Idaho just 4 or so years back. I've been doing hunting on and off since I was a kid, and so when I moved down here, it was pretty refreshing. I quickly made some close friends down here and have been loving it ever since. I wanted to talk to you about some weird animals me and my friend and his little brother encountered last September. My friend, who I met down here, has also been hunting for a very long time, and one of our favorite things to do off-season is to go out, hike, and scout out good spots to come to, and even potentially set up a tree stand at. My friend's little brother, who just turned 14 at the time, wanted to tag along, so we didn't mind at all. We went out driving into the deep woods. We were pretty close to Arkansas, that's all I can remember, and as far as exactly where we were, I couldn't really tell you. Once we got out, we hiked a little ways in, but not too terribly far. The woods out here are beautiful. Things are muggy and the brush is thick. I've never seen a Sasquatch before, but I would imagine this would be the perfect home for one of these critters. After hiking a ways in, all three of us stopped and decided to sit down and have some lunch on a fallen log. Just a little ways out of the woods was a large clearing in the woods that sloped downward a little bit. If you were to stand at the tree line and look out at the clearing, you'd be looking straight down the slope, and the clearing leveled out after some time, and then was followed by a tiny creek with more woods. Now, as we're eating, I'm looking out into this clearing, and I notice the small creek. I think to myself, this might be a great spot to come back to and get some good game. Then, I looked over a little ways towards the other end of the creek that went right into the woods, and I noticed these two very large animals eating what looks to be a deer carcass. This slope goes down probably 150 to 170 yards, and these animals were down there by the creek feasting. At first, I thought they were just two huge wolves eating a deer. Texas is home to red wolves. That much I do know, so I didn't quite think much of it. But as I sat there and watched these animals eat, I began to think that they're too big to be wolves. They were literally the size of large elk, feasting on this tiny deer carcass. Something wasn't right about all of this. My buddy and his little brother were still eating and talking, and hadn't yet noticed what I was watching. Then, my friend's stupid little brother starts screaming as loud as he could because some bug crawled on his leg, and he's terrified of bugs. His older brother, who is confused, is trying to calm him down and is trying to tell him to stop being a huge pussy and man up. It's the woods. I turned back from watching this happen in front of me, and I look back, and these wolves are not only looking up at me in my direction, but they just must have heard the commotion. They were just staring straight up at me. I wasn't comfortable at all with this situation, and so quietly, I calmly led my friend and his stupid younger brother, who doesn't even belong being out here, back around in a totally different direction, hoping to avoid those wolves. We ended up circling back around to our vehicle and got out of there. I never did tell my friend and brother what I saw. It's probably better that way. I didn't think we had wolves that big out here, but I guess we do. If you're ever in the woods in eastern Texas, keep an eye out for large predators. Sometimes at night, I hear things around my yard and my house that sounds like a really, really big bear. That is until one night I actually saw what it was. A werewolf. Or so I believe. I don't have a big house, and my yard is rather small. I have a fence on all sides of my backyard, side, and my front yard happens to be open. My driveway extends to the road, and on the other side of the road drops down. And then there's just woods for miles on miles after that. Behind my house is also woods, and to the left and right of me are other houses. The past few months now, I've been hearing what sounds like heavy breathing and scratching sounds along my house, and I can never quite figure out what it is. I always thought it was some raccoon or something, but it didn't sound like that. It's like if somebody was dragging a really long, sharp piece of metal alongside your house, very slowly. Then, I would randomly hear growling noises. I thought someone was outside my house, getting ready to come in and kill me. I've checked outside multiple times, and of course, nothing. I'm not sure what to quite make of it. A few nights ago, I'm sitting in my living room, watching some older episodes of Game of Thrones, and I see this dog face pop up in my window. I about shot myself and fell off of my couch. This thing had the most evil grin I've ever seen. Red glowing eyes and teeth that were way too sharp and big for its mouth. It looked like it came straight out of hell. I screamed as loud as I could, and I ran to go grab my machete, which I keep by the front door. I grabbed it and I ran back, and it was gone. No trace of it. Nothing. I was so scared. It looked just like a werewolf, and it was standing upright looking into my window. I feel so violated. I have motion sensors outside of my home, and so if anything moves in my yard or in front of the house, they go off. I'm getting back from town not too long after that, and about to pull into my house when I see my motion lights go on, and my jaw drops as this huge 9-foot-tall werewolf thing comes strolling through my yard to the other side, headed in the neighbor's house's direction. I could only assume this was the same creature that had been looking in my windows. I've since talked to both my surrounding neighbors, and one of them won't even talk about it. I think he knows something is out there, but doesn't want to believe it. The other one is an old man who says he's seen this thing many times, and then it comes through this area every time this part of the year. He told me he's caught it looking into his house before, several times, and he's learned it's not going to hurt him, or so far hasn't hurt him yet. He told me there's a large population of deer that actually live in the woods behind our houses a little ways back, and it used to be a good hunting spot for years and years, back due just to the large population of deer. I guess at some point, though, there was a ban on hunting deer because the population was low, and because of that, hunters left the area and never came back. So the deer were able to not only repopulate, but now they're overpopulated. I understand now that there's so much food back there for this thing. I'm not sure if it was a werewolf, but do werewolves even migrate? I'm not too sure. All I know is there's some large predator that looks like a werewolf back around my house, feasting on deer and looking into people's windows. I'm not sure what to do. I work as a ranch exterminator, or I guess that's what my boss calls me. My job is to find potential threats to livestock and eliminate the problem entirely. So far, the only thing I've ever had to take down was a bear and a bunch of coyotes, and it hasn't been too much of a problem until we ended up getting the buffalo wolves coming in. What are buffalo wolves, you ask? Only the largest and most dangerous alpha predator you'll ever run into besides a bear. The ranch I live and work on has many horses, cows, goats, chickens, you name it. There's acres and acres of land, much of it being open pasture with minimal trees and minimal problems. We've definitely had our fair share of coyotes before, and when I first started this job, we had a huge herd of them that would get brave and move in to attack the horses and other livestock. Of course, my job being what it is, I had to eliminate many of them due to their aggressive behavior towards other animals. I take pride in my work, and I like to keep equipped with the right tools for the job, just like any master of a craft would have tools for his job. I've set up multiple bear traps, killed coyotes, and I've taken down a few mountain lions or two. I've been doing this for years, but every year is something new. Luckily for me, my 30/30 has been my trusted friend and has really helped me take care of any issues I might have with predators and threats to animals. Even though it's only really used for deer, it's helped me take down some coyotes. The mountain lions and bear? Well, that was a little bit of a different story. However, lately I don't feel so cocky. I feel stumped, like I've been checkmated. It's now July, and the owner and I started noticing these really large wolves start to appear all over the ranch since about late April. It's been getting warmer around here, so I'm not sure if that has anything to do with it. These wolves always seem to appear around evening time, and they wait and they watch. They observe where we put the animals. They watch in the morning as the animals are pulled out. It really makes me nervous. I think it's an entire pack of them. I've seen smaller ones, and then there's one really big one. I assume that's the alpha male. The first attack was on one of the horses. I was doing rounds, and I found one of the horses dead out in the field, with its entire neck and belly ripped open, and gore and guts strewn about. This wasn't just a kill to eat. This was a kill just for the sake of killing. No animal I've ever seen does that. There were no indications that this animal was even eaten on, just torn open and left to bleed out. We had been seeing the wolves at this point, but never saw them attack the horse. The second attack happened about a week later. I was out in the field helping the owner, and I heard the goats start hooping and hollering, and I grabbed my 30-30 and I run over to where we keep the goats as fast as I can. As I'm approaching, I'm seeing the largest wolf I've ever seen in my life, standing up on its two legs, ripping this goat literally in half, right in front of us. The other goats are screaming and freaking out, and that's when this wolf notices us. It looked pissed and let out the most terrifying roar. Without thinking, I raised my rifle and I fired 4 rounds into this son of a bitch, and I know every bullet hit it too. As soon as I hit this thing, it let out an extremely loud howl of pain and bolted out of the pen into the woods. I never did find a blood trail, but I know I hit it. We scoured around the pen, but other than that torn in half goat, we couldn't really find any trace that I actually did hit this thing. The next night, I was getting ready to head into the house. It was getting later, and the sun was just about finished setting. I hadn't seen any trace of the wolves since the last attack, and I shot at that big one. I'm getting ready to head into the house, and I happen to look, and I see one of those bastards heading right for the pig pen again. I messed up big time, and I realized I left my 30-30 in the house from earlier in the day. I quickly retreated to the house to grab my rifle, and I ran back outside as fast as I could. By then, all you could hear was the pigs squalling and hollering, and so I bolted into the pig pen as soon as I could. Right as I was about to approach the pen, this thing comes out with a dead pig in its arms. The throat had been torn out, and there was blood everywhere and all over this creature. Here it was, standing 10 feet away from me, and I shot at it as many times as I could, not holding anything back. It's like my bullets were hitting a brick wall. I didn't even really see them go into this animal, but I know I hit it, especially being that close. As soon as I shot at this beast, it began to contest its territory and act very aggressive. It wasn't running away. After firing a few shots at it, it just stood there. This looked evil, and it was ready to challenge me for its meal it just stole. It began to step toward me, and I turned around and I fled for the house, never once checking if this thing was following right behind me. You could hear animal screams and howls all night long after that, coming from the woodline and all over the property. I'm not sure what else to do at this point. I've failed my boss. I'm not able to outgun whatever animal this is. These are highly intelligent predators that must be taken carefully. We checked the property in the morning time, and there were several dead horses. 4 of our pigs were slaughtered as well, and quite a few other random animals with their guts torn out. This wasn't a feeding. This was a slaughter. I'm at a loss for what to do. What kind of weapon do I use to take these bitches down? I'm writing this because I might not survive this summer with these wolves on the property, and I have yet to know what my boss plans to do. If you have a ranch, make sure you have plenty of firepower. It's something I should have never underestimated. This is the first time I have ever really told anybody about this, besides my best friend. I'm 19 now, and this happened to me back when I was 9. I remember it was a really warm night, and I was sleeping next to my window in my bed. I had the window open, and I have a screen in the window. I don't have my bed pushed against the wall like a lot of people do. Instead, I have my bed pushed up against the window, so it's the long side against the window. That means when I lay in bed, my torso can touch the whole screen of the window. I'm laying in bed this night, so it's hot, and I have my window wide open with the screen in. I'm laying there, blankets off me, and my shirt is even off. The window was my only slight grace of cool air coming. I remember waking up to the sound of what I heard as tearing. I opened my eyes to see this monster standing in my window, using the claw on its finger to try and quietly cut through my screen. I screamed bloody murder, and this thing just smirked at me. It was the evilest looking grin. Thank the Grinch stole Christmas, like his evil smile that he gives. It was getting satisfaction out of my sheer terror. My dad barges into the room, sees the creature in my window, and immediately runs to grab his gun. This thing steps back into the shadows beyond my window, and my dad rushes back in with his 12-gauge shotgun, rushing toward the window, ready to blow this thing's head clean off. My dad doesn't see anything and tells me to go to his bedroom now. I'm still sobbing uncontrollably at this point, and he goes outside to deal with the situation. I didn't hear anything for a while, and then I heard a couple shotgun blasts and some really loud howling and screeching. A few moments later, I remember him coming into the bedroom and setting the shotgun down, and then he sits down next to me. He puts his hand on my shoulder and gently tells me that I'll be sleeping in his bedroom from now on. After that night, he patched up my window the next day, and even installed a security camera system in our house, just so he can monitor everything going on outside. He wasn't taking any chances. This monster, which I wasn't able to see perfectly, but I made out enough detail that it looked like a wolf monster. It looked half man, half wolf, and had glowing orange eyes. It had huge fangs, and I remember specifically that it was salivating a lot. It was pretty hairy too, and it was smart, which was frightening since it knew to try and quietly cut my screen open to do only who knows what to me. It probably wanted to kidnap me and eat me for all I knew. I don't like to talk about it, but writing this out really helps me feel better. I just take every day as a new day and not let past trauma ruin my life. I used to be an officer and ended up getting pretty injured in '09 and have since been relieved of duty. This event takes place early November of 2004. I was doing my usual patrol around in the early morning hours. I think it was a little after 3 a.m. when this event occurred. The area I patrol is pretty heavily wooded for the most part, and not a whole lot of houses in the area, so it can get pretty boring at night. I had pulled my vehicle over to the side of the road just to make a quick phone call when I looked up from what I was doing to see in my headlights really bright eye shine. The first thing I immediately thought of was that it was just a deer, but the eye shine on this thing was huge. I'd say it was about 9 or so feet off the ground, behind a set of trees. My vehicle to the tree line was roughly 50 yards. I just kept my headlights on this thing and watched it closely. It stood there for a minute, watching my headlights, and then it looks like it turned to the right and began to walk away. Whatever it was clearly bipedal and was enormous. My windows were up since it was November, and you could even hear it walking through the forest as it left my headlights' view. The steps sounded really, really heavy, with loud cracking and breaking sounds of what sounded like larger branches that had fallen. I put my vehicle in drive and off I went. I didn't tell my team or dispatch anything about this event. I don't believe in Bigfoot or anything like that, so I'm not quite convinced. But I find it very interesting it was watching my vehicle before I even looked up. That tells me there's definitely some thinking going on in their brain. I don't know of any animal that lives out in the woods that's roughly 9 feet tall and bipedal, but it still makes me wonder to this day, what was it? I'm in my 30s. I'm male, and I'm a real estate broker, and a pretty successful one at that. My parents own a real estate firm, and so it's just been the family business. It's all I know. Why is this important to the story? Well, my parents are pretty well off, and so they purchased this really nice log cabin up in the mountains of Colorado. I haven't been there since this event, which was some years back, but it's beautiful. You go outside, there's snow on the ground, the view is perfect, and you're surrounded by aspen trees everywhere. Me and my girlfriend went up to stay here in this cabin years back in January. It had been pretty cold, and so we were looking forward to being snowed in and just taking it easy from work and relaxing. It's quite a long drive out to the cabin. I want to say a good 2 to 2.5 hours from her house. She lives in Colorado, moved here to go to school years back. It's already dark out by the time we get to the cabin, and it's starting to snow pretty heavy. Good thing we had really good tires and chains on. We get to the cabin, and things are pretty normal. We get a fire going and get all cozied up and enjoy our time together. Well, later on that night, we're lying in bed, and my woman gets up to get some water from the kitchen. About a minute later, I hear her frantically screaming her head off, and now I'm wide awake. She comes rushing into me, and I come out running to her and meet her halfway. What's wrong? What's wrong? I'm asking, freaking out. She tells me there was a werewolf outside the house, and it was looking through the window. Keep in mind, it's snowing really hard at this point, and there's already several feet of snow. Plus, it's pitch black outside since there are no lights. I told her, come back to bed, and she's probably just overly tired. She insisted it was true, and was on the verge of tears, telling me what she saw. I couldn't just not believe her. I know my girlfriend enough to know she was actually being genuine and truthful. I told her I would check it out, so I got on my snow boots and jacket and stepped out on the front porch with a flashlight. I felt stupid for being out here in the dark all alone. If something was truly out there, it would have gotten me right then and there. I checked around the sides of the house and didn't see anything, except for when I got by the kitchen window outside. I noticed huge prints of something that was just standing there. It was snowing hard still, so the prints were starting to get filled in, but you could still make something out. Something huge was there. I shone my light all around to see where the prints were. It looked like they trailed off towards the woods. If this is what my girlfriend really saw, I had no desire to go after it. What really puzzled me is I couldn't see where this thing started. I just saw prints, and in no way did this thing just materialize next to our window and walk off. That's when I looked up and noticed part of the wood of the roof was a little broken in off the edge. Oh my God, I thought to myself. This thing was on the roof, on the freaking roof, and had jumped down right here and stared in the window. The thought that this animal was on our rooftop, knowing it was smart enough to get on our roof, made me instantly nauseous right there. I was sick. I got back inside as fast as I could, and I calmly told my girlfriend we needed to leave as soon as morning comes. She didn't even ask any questions. She just agreed. We didn't really sleep much that night. I don't know why I didn't. She's the one that saw whatever thing this was. I just knew the reality that it had to have been around our house before we even knew it was there. What if it had been watching us? Watching my parents the times they come out here? As soon as the sun came up, we got out of there and left back to town. I really thought about telling my parents, but I don't think they'll take me seriously. All I know is my girlfriend and I won't ever go back, unfortunately. No thank you. This encounter happens to be from one of our very own readers, Sniper308. Here's his story. I swear on my life this is true. I have been trying to decide whether or not to share this for months now. It's not because it's too personal or anything like that. The reason I haven't wanted to share it is because I fully realize that 99 out of 100 of you absolutely will not believe this, or may think it has a simple answer, but I assure you it does not. If I did not have a witness to this, I am certain that I would never be sharing this. But I have talked to the person who I was with when this whole thing went down, and he has given me permission to both name and tag him to this post. So, here it is. The year was 95, and it was the early fall on a Friday. And I know it was on a Friday for a reason that you will see later. One of my very best friends, Jacob, who I lived very close to, had come over and asked me if I wanted to go walking around, and possibly go with him to visit his dad. It was still daylight when we took off on our journey, and after a few hours of walking around in the Russell Springs city limits, we stopped by and said hello to his dad. And by the time we left his dad's place, it had gotten fairly dark out. As we walked back to my place, we took the main street, as it was the best and shortest way back home. About halfway down Main Street, we both had to pee, and obviously, we couldn't just pee on the side of the street. So, We held it in until we could find a good spot to relieve ourselves. If you were coming from Main Street to where I lived at the time, you'd have had to pass by the Methodist Church and the dance shop, and right past the dance shop is an apartment complex. After passing the apartments, we took a shortcut through a vacant field that also provided us with a perfect spot to pee and not be seen. Now, I'm going to cut in here and explain exactly where this is. If you know where Premier Drug and the Active Day Center and the Russell Springs Head Start is located, then the best way to point out the exact spot we were standing is to be facing the Head Start playground and walk straight through it and keep walking about 30 feet into an empty field behind it. Now, back to the story. As I had previously pointed out, it had gotten dark, but it wasn't so dark that you couldn't easily see your surroundings. And that was also partly due to the ambient lights coming from the street lights on the main street and other lights. Jacob and I were standing in an L shape of sorts, to where I was facing the apartment complex, and he was facing the direction of the road, which was Jamestown Street, and we finally began to pee. As most guys do, I was looking downward at first, and after a few seconds passed by, I started to look straight in front of me. For some strange reason, all I could see was complete darkness. No streetlights, nothing. That's when I started looking upward to the sky, and, well, I instantly knew why I wasn't able to see anything anymore. Now, this is where the story takes a turn from an average night to the most frightening, amazing, unbelievable, and shocking night of my life. I looked up and this beast that was at least 9 feet tall was looking down at me. This thing is what blocked out my view of the light and everything else. It was literally 3 feet in front of me. It had these large, yellowish, green glowing eyes, and its teeth were exposed the same way a growling dog shows its teeth. I was frozen solid, and the only thing moving was the pee that was still flowing out of me. Jacob was still standing about 4 feet from me, and out of the corner of my mouth I said, "Jacob, turn around now." Out of the corner of my eye I saw him turn, and he instantly froze with terror, just like me. When something like this happens to a person, all of your senses are heightened as a result of the adrenaline flowing through your veins. I clearly remember noticing the way that the saliva that coated the beast's sharp teeth reflected the streetlights off in the distance. This thing never once made the slightest bit of noise, and after what felt like an eternity, it just hunched down real quick on all fours and took off covering a distance of at least 300 yards in no more than 5 or 6 seconds, until the point it went straight through the thick brush wood line that was behind a barbed wire fence. Another odd thing was that this field was not flat at all. It has several dips and rises to it. This beast wasn't flying or anything, but somehow it never moved up and down with the dips in the field. Its body and back stayed straight the entire time. Now, I will give you some better details of the looks of this thing. Like I said, it was at least 9 feet tall because I'm 5'11", and my eye level came just to its lower chest. It had the body of an extremely large and muscular bodybuilder. This thing would make Arnold Schwarzenegger look like a baby. Another detail I noticed was that it had human-looking hands and fingers, but with 2 to 3 inch long sharp nails or claws on its fingers. It was covered in black and grayish hair that was maybe 2 inches long in some areas and shorter in others. It had the head of a wolf, basically. Not exactly, but really close. I know that what I'm describing sounds like a werewolf, but I really hate to call it that because even after seeing this thing, I still have trouble saying that I believe werewolves are real. But that's what this thing was. As soon as this thing was out of sight, myself and Jacob took off running towards my house, about 1/4 of a mile away, and I never ran so fast in my entire life. We went in and slammed the door shut and locked it, and then I went to the gun cabinet and grabbed my 12-gauge pump shotgun and handed Jacob my rifle. Obviously, my mom and dad started freaking out, asking us what on earth was going on. We were both breathing heavily, shaking and pouring sweat. We started yelling at them what had just happened, and they might have thought we were joking, but they knew by the looks of us that it was no joke. Now, at this point, I would like to say that no, we had not done any drugs. We had not drank a drop or anything like that. It was not a figment of our imagination, since two people don't both hallucinate and see the exact same thing. We just kept asking ourselves, did that really just happen? Did we really just see that? And we kept reaffirming to ourselves that we had not lost our minds. Now, if you remember me saying that I knew this happened on a Friday, that's because we both stayed up the rest of the night, waiting for daybreak on Saturday morning so that we can go back armed with guns to look the place over again just to see if we can find any footprints, fur, broken limbs, or a break in the barbed wire fence that the beast clearly went straight through. I should also note that when it went through the fence, it never made a noise. I don't know how it even went through the fence without causing some serious damage just due to the extremely thick amount of large thorn brush and trees, but there was never a trace. To this day, I will never understand what it was, why it was there, and most importantly, why it didn't just kill us both with one strike that night, because it was looking into my eyes. I could just feel the pure hate and evil coming from it. But I am really glad that it didn't kill us, because the both of us would have been found with our pants unzipped, 3 feet from each other with ourselves completely exposed. I'm fairly sure that the police wouldn't have looked at us and said, "These boys must have been killed by a werewolf," while they were peeing. Case closed. I guess I will just end it here, but I just want to say again that I do not expect any of you to even start to believe me, because if I had not seen it, I wouldn't believe it either. But I absolutely swear on my life and on everything that I love that this was a real event. It did really happen, and it happened exactly as I have just told you. Have a good one. Also, over the time between then and now, I have kept trying to come up with some logical explanation of it, like a person in a costume playing a joke, or something like that. But no, I just can't do it. A person in a costume would have had to make some sort of noise, be over 9 feet tall, and be able to run over 100 miles an hour, so there's that. Also, I have heard of others who have described seeing the exact same thing as what I did, the same glowing eye color and everything. I would give anything to find out the truth of this.